And we're on. All right. Hope you enjoyed that little intro sequence that we made. That was the premiere for our intro sequence. So the first time,
Pete.
Yeah, the first time Ed's seen it for anyone. We're gonna be playing that now as our little intro. So hope you enjoy it. And if you hated it, then too bad.
Then you're dead to us.
You're just gonna have to get over it. But welcome. We're the Pinedo Brothers. I'm Peter, and I have my brother right here.
Howdy, I'm JP.
And yeah, today we're talking to you about music, one of my favorite topics, and I believe JP's as well. So specifically, we're going to be talking about how music inspires us as artists and how we kind of incorporate music into our work, both writing and filmmaking, and everything that we do.
Maybe we should remind people who we are, though.
Oh, yes.
What do we do?
Pinedo Brothers. So what do? Yeah, we are Catholic artists and filmmakers right now working in Hollywood.
Momentarily.
But what we are trying to do is revitalize the world of Catholic art and make it great like it once was. Make it something that is on the frontiers of art in all forms of art. Music, writing, storytelling of all forms. And not make it this kind of run-over-the-mill kind of preachy milk-wash thing. But something that's interesting and fun to watch or read.
Exactly. If you're tired of the leftist agenda that's coming out of Hollywood that just runs wild over any values that you have, and you might be a little bit tired of maybe some of the soppy faith-based fare, you might be interested in some of our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's us.
Yeah. We're here to tell good stories that are coming from a perspective of faith in Catholicism. So yeah. That gives you an idea of who we are, but today we're talking about music. Music is a very Catholic thing, I would say. Would you agree with me?
Yes, and especially in that I think that art in general is a very Catholic thing.
Mm-hmm.
We deal in symbols all the time. But tell me, how's music different?
I mean, just since the Middle Ages, the Catholic faith has been the one pioneering the great musicians, the great music, from the liturgy, all kinds of just glorious things. Like today, my roommate was showing me something that they sing in the Vespers, the night Vespers for the Feast of St. Peter. And it was that line from Matthew 16:18 where they're talking about, where Jesus says to Peter, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." And they take that line and they just put it in the music, and it's just like glorious. You hear it and you're like, whoa! You're like, that's pretty awesome, and it makes you really proud to be named Peter. But yeah, it's just like that. They take that moment and they realize it, and that's what music has the ability to do, is to make you feel and think about things that you might not have thought about otherwise. It makes you really, really immersed into whatever the narrative is. And just in this song that we're talking about, the moment where Jesus, knights Peter and makes him.
Ooh, I like that. Knights Peter.
Yeah, he gives him, you are Peter. This is a big moment where he's receiving his new identity as the rock of the church, and in music immerses you into that moment. Kind of gives you a feeling of what that must have been like for Peter, But anyway, that I digress a little bit. But yeah, as you can see, music is super exciting to me. So today we're going to specifically talk about how I incorporated music into my book, The Unfollowed. Where is it? Oh, it's over there. Yeah, we've showed it to you before.
The Unfollowed, folks.
Yes. Which, if you're unfamiliar with our work, and if you haven't listened to our podcast before, The Unfollowed is a book that I published this year. It's a science fiction novel, kind of young adult genre of writing, but anyone could read it, I think, and enjoy it, as long as you have an open mind. But it's science fiction, like I said, zombie kind of apocalypse kind of feel. But something that I did in The Unfollowed is that you might have noticed, if you've read the book, each chapter starts with a song. Citation, like I'll just reference a song. There's different artists there, like Judah and the Lion is one of them, Gungor, and a number of different artists. But I put those songs up there at the beginning just so that the reader could go and listen to them, and that should give them a little bit of the feel of what that chapter is supposed to feel like. Because sometimes it can be hard to communicate, and that's what as a writer, you're always trying to communicate the feeling and the vision of what these people are seeing and going through. But I felt like as I was listening to music, because I always listen to music when I write, and so sometimes specific songs would really just inspire me to write that chapter. And so I would put, oh, this song really will give the reader, the feel that I'm going for in this chapter. So without further ado, let's go into a story that really inspired The Unfollowed. And it's a very different, we're going to show you a scene from a movie called Baby Driver, which is one of my favorite movies.
We watched that here in Burbank in the Dolby Atmos Theater,
Yeah.
which I feel was probably the perfect place to watch this film.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar, this movie is entirely driven by music, and sound and music is very important to the storyline in the movie. But we saw it here in Burbank at like one of the best theaters around, and where the sound is just incredible. So it was like, whoa, yeah, it was a glorious experience. But we're going to show you a scene from Baby Driver, which is a very different kind of feel from The Unfollowed. The Unfollowed is very dark, very post-apocalyptic kind of feel, but Baby Driver is more of one of those classic like bank heist capers kind of movies. But the similarity, which we'll talk about the similarities after we watch it. Let's just go ahead and jump it right into the scene.
All right, roll film.
Next customer.
Oh,
Can I take your order?
yeah. I'll have 4 black coffees, medium.
Name?
Baby.
Baby?
B-A-B-Y, baby.
Hitchhike, baby, across the floor. Whoa, 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 I can't stand it no more. Sin is your enemy. Sin can be washed away. Now come on, baby, don't walk away from your sin. Now get into your stride. Round, hold it right. Yeah. Shake, shake the tail feather, baby. Woo! Shake the tail feather, baby.
Upwards of $200,000.
Okay. that scene is great. Baby Driver. Yeah, I think I kind of am of the opinion that Baby Driver is, in a sense, kind of a modern fairy tale, in that fairy tales, what do fairy tales incorporate? They incorporate, magic in a way, and there's a certain kind of magic in the movie Baby Driver.
Man, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it has all the classic elements. It's about, a young man trying to overcome evil, and that's what all the fairy tales are about, right? And there's everything about it is just on this sense of how he's raised in a certain way. He's almost kind of like Rapunzel raised inside of a tower, where everything, if you notice, that everything he says in the film is something that he's heard in a song or on TV. He's this person who has never really been exposed to society or anything like that, and his only experience with other people is with this criminal underworld, and he's kind of breaking out of that, and in the meantime falls in love and saves this girl. So it's a pretty fun story. What do you think? Are you as big of a fan of it as I am?
It's so funny that you say it. I didn't attach that level of meaning to it. Mm-hmm. When I watched it, I was like, this is so fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was like great summer popcorn fare.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was a little bit like, okay, I move on at the end of it. You and there's nothing wrong with a movie like that. Mm-hmm. I think some movies should just be that. And if I wouldn't want to watch a movie that I was like, oh, that stayed with me. That's so ponderous. I need to think about it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to watch that every time. And I can have no denying that it's incredibly technically proficient. Mm-hmm. The artistry of it, the way the music moves with each shot, the way that it interweaves the editing, the motion editing as well as the graphic object editing. I mean, Edgar Wright he's probably better at editing in camera than anyone else working in Hollywood right now, anyone else working anywhere in the world. I think Soderbergh might be close second, but Wright just knows how to edit in camera. So I hats off to Baby Driver and to his work in Baby Driver. But no, I think you read more inside of it than I did, which I appreciate. I need to hear more. I need to watch it again is what I'm getting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always enjoy watching it again, especially if you crank up the volume so you can hear all the music and everything. The sound design is phenomenal.
I'm into that.
There's certain scenes where the song, like each movement and each time, like let's say a gun goes off or a bullet is fired, is timed with the song, so that it's just like a synchronized kind of dance almost. So I can't say enough. Obviously, it's one of my favorite movies. But one of the things I really like about it is how it ties music into it. It makes music part of the storyline, which is something that I do in the Unfollowed. So we're gonna read y'all a little excerpt of the Unfollowed, and then we're gonna discuss music and how something like that scene that you just watched from Baby Driver can relate to a story about a zombie apocalypse. So without further ado, James.
Here we go. I stalked out of the dining hall and back into the room I had slept in. I went into the bathroom and studied my face. Nothing had changed. I still had the small black scars that had crept up my neck, and my eyes had bags around them. But that wasn't new. I rolled back my long sleeves to look at my arms. They were as bad as ever, but no worse. My arms had turned different shades of blue and purple and were traced by crusty black veins. At first, I had tried to remove the black veins like a scab, but like a scab not yet healed, the pain was terrible, and attempts to remove them only caused bleeding. I stared into my eyes. Nothing was different, but everything was. This is the end, I remember thinking. I wasn't sure how or why, but I knew my story had reached its end. Kara, Zoe. Kara, Zoe. I kept repeating aloud as I stared into the mirror. This can't be the end. I have to go on for them. This is the end. I shook my head vigorously and grunted. No, I shouted. Kara, Zoe, Kara, Zoe. I must have repeated their names 1,000 times. Something moved in the back of my mind. I felt some kind of presence that was not my own. This is how you end. My entire body began shaking uncontrollably as the icy presence enveloped me. Kara smiled in my mind. The colors in the room went wild. Everything was vibrant and alive. The world was spinning and bounding savagely. Zoe's face laughed innocently in my head. The room froze, and all that had been in motion became static. Nothing moved. The entire world stood still, waiting, holding its breath, anticipating the end. I looked into my eyes. They were cloudy and white, like a bowl of milk. My pupils were gone. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't worried. I just stared into the mirror. It was a sudden and uncontrollable convulsion. I threw my head forward and it smashed the glass. The world was motion again. The colors came alive and fled into the grayness again. The sound of the smashing glass was deafening and echoed over and over again. Crimson blood burst from my face and fell into the sink and onto the broken mirror with a cataclysmic air, as if the blood was a force of nature, finally being unleashed. Sound overcame my head. I heard voices. I heard music, a taunting and high-pitched voice, an unknown but familiar tune. Pain. My head burst into a spasm of pain, and I reeled back, falling sprawled out onto the floor. Involuntarily, my body spazzed. I lost control. My body was a force of nature, and as in a storm, my mind was enveloped in its force. My head swung back and forth, and my arms flailed wildly. I turned over and clawed my way towards the door. Music. I heard it in the distance. It was a sweet and innocent tune, familiar yet alien at the same time. The song brought long-forgotten memories to my mind. I saw myself as a child, playing soldier in the Pirate Street house backyard. It was the song I had known once, but I had forgotten the words. I crawled forward, noticing the dust on the ground. The floor was so dirty, but I had never noticed. Pushing up on my arms, I rose. It felt strange in my feet. The floor seemed oddly far. As I approached the bedroom door, I tried focusing on the handle, but my eyes would not obey my mind. As a drunk man struggles to open a door, so I fought with myself to twist the doorknob. Eventually, the handle turned and the door swung open. I stepped into the hall and was immediately blinded by the electric lights. Stumbling forward, I ran into someone. I looked up and my heart dropped. I stared into the eyes of a demon, some kind of monster from my worst nightmare. Its eyes were deep crimson, and they pierced through my body, burning my insides. Its face was porcelain white, and it had been a long beak that protruded from where its nose should have been. I tried pushing it away, but it reached out its terrible black arms, and I was trapped in a perverted embrace. No matter how much I struggled, it pulled me closer into itself, as if its body was hell, and I was falling into it. I had to escape. I couldn't let it pull me into the abyss. In a final desperate attempt to escape, I grabbed it by the shoulders with all my strength and sunk my teeth into its neck. Finally, the monster pushed me away and reeled back. I didn't stop to look at it again. Floundering to my feet, I ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction. I was consumed by a deep sense of horror. I have to escape. I can't let it get me. Heat emanated from the ground and the walls, clinging to my skin. It felt as if my entire body was on fire. I rounded a corner and there was another fiend just a few feet away. The monster had the same growing crimson eyes, but this one had a giant mouth with enormous jagged teeth. Spinning on the soles of my feet, I turned and another creature emerged, then another after that. Nowhere to run. Heat, terror, crimson eyes. Nowhere to run. Music. I could hear the ancient melody in the distance. I could not think of the words to help you understand how the song sounded. In the music, I heard the sounds of kingdoms and empires rising and crouching like waves upon a craggy shore. It was a lonely song, the tune of heroes and villains, lovers and haters, passion and longing. With a renewed burst of energy, I pushed my way into the crowd of beasts. I almost made it through them, but one of them grabbed onto my arm. I turned and bit into this one too. It was my last line of defense, but it seemed to work. Just like the other one, this monster recoiled, and I was freed to run. Following the music, I made my way outside the building and into the gray world. The coast was clear, not a monster in sight. I paused for a second, cocking my head in an attempt to locate the song's origin. It was coming from somewhere further into the woods, Behind me, I heard the hideous noises of the monsters inside, ahead of the dreamy beauty of the song, and behind the nightmarish terror of the demons. I bounded forward and sprinted across the lawn between the building and the fence. The tall grass parted around me, as if I was pushing through the ethereal boundaries to enter into a new world. When I made it to the fence, the last border between me and the new world, I found that there were others already at the gates. They seemed familiar somehow. They had a name. Ghosts. That's what I called them. They stared at me, their blank stares meeting mine. The trees behind them rose like immense bones. For a moment all was still. I was suspended in the cartilage of a world that was being formed all around me. Suddenly all the ghosts began snarling savagely, but their ferocity was not directed towards me. I turned to see that the monsters were running across the lawn coming straight for me. Escape. Find the music. That's all that matters. I concentrated every ounce of energy inside me and swung open the gate. That is an incredibly sad moment in this book. And whenever I read it, I have a hard time reading it. Like I have a hard time reading it word for word. I've read it more than once now, because it's someone that's losing himself. You're describing, The Walking Dead never describes what it feels like to turn into a zombie, and that's like you're describing it. And I don't think the folks that haven't read this won't know that that's the moment when he's actually killing the people that he loves the most. Maybe the people that he swore to protect, he's killing at that moment. And so it's a very difficult part to read. But that is the part you wanted me to read. So back to you, Peter.
Yeah, so hopefully we didn't depress y'all too much. But yeah, like James said, that scene is very, it's a kind of a pivotal point in the story. That's where our main character, Raphael, who's been fighting against this kind of infection that's been growing in him and these tendencies that are growing in him, he's been fighting and resisting, but this is the point where he loses himself. He loses touch with reality and with his own identity. But in this scene, we talk a lot about music. Or I talk a lot about music. So, why? Like, why is that in there? But I think to answer that question, we can ask another question. Classic politician
Let
move.
me answer that with another question.
But just think about, like, what does music mean to you? I think music has, like I said, has the ability to make you feel things that you have either never felt or haven't felt in a long time. But what do you think, James? What does music mean to you?
Okay, well, I don't know. That took too much out of me. I need to have a little bit more to answer that question.
Here we go.
So, music means, well, the simplest definition I had back in all my music minor classes back in college was organized sound, is what music is. Now, that doesn't really satisfy me because I think that you could organize something that is not music. But I think it's the closest I could get to a broad definition of what music is. What does it mean to me? Like on a personal level, though? Is that what your question is?
Yeah.
Well, it's another language. It's another language of that Plato and Aristotle thought of it as the means by which the masses are controlled. And what I take away from that is that it is a language that speaks on a level that is closer to our soul. It's closer to moving us as on a much deeper and emotional level, and even beyond emotion, it on a level towards beauty than what words can do, which is why it's so important in everything that I do. But as far as what it means to me, I can't completely answer that. I think I'm just saying what it means to other people, and not saying what it means to me. But I would start with one of those two and then get back to you.
Well, I think it can be difficult to describe what it means to you because if you're like me, you love music, and it's hard to describe objectively something that you love. But I really liked what you said about it being a different language, because that's what we're talking about today. Using music as another means to tell a story. And here we have Raphael, who he hears this music, and this is part of his transformation. And the idea in the book is that this virus affects everyone differently. If you're infected, you're not necessarily going to change into a zombie, but you might. And you're not necessarily going to turn right away, but you might. So there's all these questions, these uncertainties, and the transformation is different for everyone. But for Raphael, it's a song, it's music that he hears, and it's coming from the distance, and it makes him think of when he was a kid. But there's something off about it, something that he can't quite describe, something that is perverted.
It makes me think of Tolkien's something that looks fair but feels foul. It's like something that sounds fair but feels foul. That was he used that to describe some sort of villain in the Fellowship of the Ring. But in any case, sorry, keep on going.
Yeah, I love that. J.R. Tolkien is my favorite author. Well, I think we've mentioned that before. But I really loved just being able to put in music in there and put songs into the stories so that I could communicate on another level with the reader. But in this part of the story, I'm telling the reader, I'm leaving it open to the reader to kind of hear their own thing, like whatever it is that reminds them of their childhood. That is what I want the reader to hear, But it's this calling towards peace, because this is a character here who is desperately just trying to find himself and to fight against this infection. And so that's why when he hears something that reminds him of his childhood, that is something immediately that he has to run to and try to find, because that is his deepest sense of self, of his own identity. And when everything is crashing and burning around him, he's like, I have to get out of here, and I need to go find where this music that's coming, wherever it's coming from, I need to go find it. And that's for the rest of the book. He's been haunted by this song. And he realizes later that this song is something that is not what it seems. It's a perversion of what he thinks it is. And it's something he needs to fight and resist, like temptation.
I can resist anything except temptation. Go ahead. Sorry.
But so yeah, I hope you weren't too depressed. But I think that it's a big scene in the book, and I encourage you to give the book a try.
Don't worry about depressing them. Sometimes people need a good depression.
Then explain
better,
that.
It's better for you at the end. You might be inspired to do better with your life. No, that's not. I'm being facetious. But don't apologize for having something that's sorrowful, because, as Tolkien said, as a Tolkien episode, I guess, not all crying is evil, and in sorrow much beauty is found. So, do not apologize.
Yeah, and I think another thing about music is that because it has this ability to make you have a feeling, when you hear a song, it connects different people. You get connected with the people around you, because happy music makes people feel happy, sad music makes people feel sad. There's something that is communicated to each person independent of each other that ends up connecting them because it unites them with this same kind of feeling.
Almost a deepening of expressions, or deepening of what we can say with our words. But I'm curious, what is, so I had some questions I wanted to ask you, but what are your methods of incorporating the music into storytelling? Like, how, this is something that you and I have talked a lot about how we want to do that with what we create. And you did that with your novel, which you didn't do with me. So we didn't talk about it, but what were some of the methods that you went into?
Well, I think the first thing was just massive amounts of music intake. You know, just listening to all different types of genres. I think that as a kid, listening to music was my first form of creating stories, because you and our other brother would always listen to music, would always listen to, turn on music on the PlayStation, listen to music in the car on the PSP, things like that. And
we were a PlayStation family.
Yes. PlayStation solely. Xbox is for losers. So.
Oh, that reminds me. We're not sponsored by PlayStation, but we do have a review that we need to get to at some point.
Yes.
Don't let me forget about that.
Yes, I have it right here. We won't forget. But anyway, some of my earliest forms of like just creating stories was just being, I remember sitting in the living room and then listening to the music that y'all were listening to, and then in my mind just kind of thinking of stories to go along with those songs, because those songs really they resonated with me, and y'all listened to a wide range of different things. I think from like Enya to Coldplay to like All American Rejects. You had a wide range.
Yeah, I got a little darker than Joseph got. He might disagree with me, but I was
All
disturbed.
around me are
familiar. I was the only homeschooling Catholic child that my walk to graduate was all around me are familiar faces.
No tomorrow.
What was it how the chorus of that song was the best dreams I ever had. The best dreams I ever had are dying. Yeah, I listed a very wide range of music. That's true. You're welcome, Peter.
We're not depressed, though, we promise.
Maybe a little morose, but not depressed.
A little bit morbid, but not depressed. Don't worry. But yeah, I remember just being in the living room and sitting there listening to music and just thinking of storylines to go along with the songs. And so I haven't stopped doing that. When I am looking for some kind of inspiration to write, I will just log on to my music service and I'll listen to some music. This story specifically, I think the first song that really was like, ooh, this could go really well, because actually I thought of the Unfollowed. The inception of the idea was in the shower. So the shower is where everyone has their best thoughts.
I certainly do.
But then shortly after that, I think I heard this song by King called The Iron Sea. King is another, classic 2000s kind of band. And I heard this song, The Iron Sea, and there was this little through line that was throughout the music, this small little voice that just, and the voice in that song, King, to me, is the character Kara, the little girl Kara. Because in that song you hear that voice, and it's very innocent little voice, and then it's the last thing you hear in that song, and that is kind of like in the story where Kara, she leaves the story as a character very early, but then she kind of haunts Raph throughout the rest of the story, and so that song leaves you with that very haunting sense, and so that's kind of just to give you one little example of how like the music to me and the story are tied together, and to me I can't really separate the two, because when I hear that song, that's what it makes me think of, and then I put it in the story so you can feel that too.
Yeah, I can see that. I totally can see that. And I love how you allowed the music to influence what you're creating. I too write to music quite a bit, but I don't generally put it into the story. The music that I'm listening, there's been a couple scripts we've written where we're like, okay, we got to put this, that I'm writing it and I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, Peter, we got to put this into the actual script. But we haven't actually made the actual movie. We haven't actually made those movies yet. That's Book of Prophets. That's
Book of Prophets on its way. Boom. GoFundMe.
Shameless plug. Oh, we don't have the GoFundMe up. We'll do that another time. But okay, I wanted to. We're starting to run a little bit out of time, and we got a lot of other stuff to go over. What are some of the other? So you talked about Keane. You talked about Coldplay. You talked about a lot of. But what are some other musicians that you feel really inspired you?
There are so many, and I think in the book you really see a lot of them. Daughter, specifically the song "Medicine" by Daughter, is another one that really leaves you with that feeling of both loss, but also of love. That's a song that really evokes that kind of emotion inside of you. So if you haven't heard that, you should go listen to it now. Right? Well, after we're done with the podcast. Don't turn us off.
Wait, folks, wait.
But really, to me, it's been late. I've been thinking a lot about how I describe a lot of the pop music that we have out there today as fast food music.
What does that even mean? I don't get it.
Well, by that I kind of mean like there's a lot of artists. I say artists as in that's just what they're called, but I don't really consider them artists. But there's a lot of pop musicians out there today who are selling just they're making massive. They're having massive success, and all more power to them. But their music is kind of not music in a lot of ways. Songs like there's artists out there like Cardi B and people like that where you listen to their song and you're just like, I am not feeling, I don't feel any emotions. I don't feel uplifted at all. I guess I am feeling emotion. It's annoyance.
So if you listen to something or you watch something or you experience some sort of art that that annoys you, it's not art. Is that what we're saying?
I don't know. I mean, like, I just think that there's a lot of specifically in the pop genre today where it's kind of fallen away. And I think even as recent as like the 2012 or 2013 and the 2000s, there was a lot of musicians out there like, Fun. They're a great example of
Nate Roos.
Yeah, they're a great example of modern musicians who make actual good music, have put real talent into their songs.
Okay, I gotta push back a little bit. What is good music?
I mean, everyone has different tastes, so we gotta allow for that. Different tastes in what they like to listen to and watch. So just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's not real art. There's some things that are good in real art that I'm not a huge fan of. But there has to be at least a certain line where like if you don't meet this line, then you're just not, this is not good. There has to be an objective criteria. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I agree. I just wonder what's the objective criteria. And while we're on the subject, speaking of good art, the folks at Voyage Comics reached out to me and Peter, and there we go. Finian, they reached out to us about their new comic line, Finian and the Seven Mountains, which I think folks should check it out. I've just read the first episode, but to tell you a little bit about it, it is the story of a young boy that, well, maybe not boy, but like young man that leaves the security of his home, well, everything that he knows, to go to seek revenge. Classic revenge story. He's an Irish boy that has been had his family murdered by Vikings, and he wants to go out and seek revenge. But what's he going to do? He's just a kid on his own. He decides he's going to go to seek the Excalibur-esque sword that will grant him the power. It's the sword of St. Michael that will grant him the power to actually enact revenge on these Vikings that have killed his family. There's a lot of things I like about that premise. But one of the things I like the most about it is that they have this young man go to an actual island where they shot. The island exists. It's the island of the monks of St. Michael, where it's off the coast of Ireland, and it's where they shot the terrible Star Wars film, Episode 8. It's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool that it's a real island, and it's cool to delve into the history of that island.
It almost makes me hate Star Wars Episode 8
less.
a little bit less. Doesn't actually make me hate it less, but it almost does.
Yeah. One of the things I've read through the comic, and I really liked it. One of the things that I really liked was that how it tells a story and builds upon Catholic and Christian ideas and theology. It builds upon these traditions, Catholic traditions, and oftentimes I think Catholic storytellers are scared, if there's any out there in Hollywood, they're scared of incorporating their Catholic heritage into their work. And you can obviously tell that this work, this comic Finian and the Seven Mountains, they weren't afraid to put that Catholic heritage into their storytelling, because there's so many great things. Saint Michael, the great archangel warrior. That's pretty cool. There's got to be a lot of good potential stories in there.
Yeah, they've got so many good building blocks with this story. I feel like, okay, first of all, I want people to go watch it. I want to read it, pick it up, check it out. We keep on talking about how you need to support Catholic artists, you need to support people that are trying to tell good stories. This is a moment where you got to do it. Support it. It's $5. Spend the money and support these guys, because it's worth it. It's a good story. It's got good building blocks. I feel like that the story itself, I'm left struggling that why does it start? Why do I not see Finian's family getting killed? Maybe that they're trying to go for a younger crowd, but I really want to feel it. It comes in after it's happened. Then I also feel like we don't get a chance. There's not the pet the cat moment. That's something when you're writing a script, when you're writing a story, when you're writing anything. You're like, okay, the main character, we want the audience to bond with him, to know why we're rooting for this character. Like, okay, and it's not really enough to say, okay, he's out for revenge. Unless you see it happen, and then you're like, oh my gosh, the poor guy, but we didn't see that happen. So there wasn't a pet the cat moment where he's like, okay, this Finian guy, he's a good guy. I like him, I'm rooting for him. So that lacked that it came in the media res, in the middle of the action, and it didn't give me a reason to really to latch on to it. However, there is good building blocks here. I'm going to check out the next one, because I like where they're going with it. And the last 2 pages are amazing. The last 2 pages, really, you're like, okay, this is good. They're talking about how Star Wars was was inspired by the Knights Templar. Something I had no idea about.
Yeah, that's incredible, because I'm a huge fan of the Knights Templar, because I've done a lot of research on the Knights Templar. I've written a lot of research papers and things about the Crusades and the Knights Templar, and it's something that nobody really knows about. And so that's what they do in this story. They're taking this Catholic heritage, this history that is not talked about or put into stories, and it's putting it out there for people to enjoy. But the fact that George Lucas in Star Wars actually kind of was inspired by the Knights Templar makes a whole lot of sense. But it's really awesome to hear, because I didn't know that.
I didn't either. So, folks, check out Finian. Thank you, Voyage Comics, for telling us about this and sending us this comic. We really enjoyed reading it, and we hope that you send us more. So, moving on. We're running out of time here, Pete. How can we sum all of this up about music?
Well, I think that the whole thing, idea we're trying to communicate here, is that music and storytelling are intrinsically tied. You know, they go hand in hand. And we as Catholic artists and storytellers want you to go out and to be supporting and to be consuming this form of art and this form of storytelling. If you know of good Catholic musicians, support them. If you know of good Catholic comic book writers, support them. And if you know us, support us. But it's really important for us as Catholics to support one another in our pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful, because that's what we're trying to do.
And there's a lot of good Catholic artists out there that are struggling to make it and to punch through into the mainstream. And there's a lot of good Catholic musicians. We're not one of them. We're not the musicians out there. But check them out. Look for them. Maybe we can post a few links to some good Catholic musicians we know in the description of this video. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse Lee Yarbrough, that what was it? Something
JL Kick Boom.
Yeah,
At
real
JL
good
Kick
drum.
Boom on Instagram. Great place to look. Good idea.
Yeah, but if you want this good revitalization of Catholic art, we really have to go after it and to not be afraid to talk about our Catholic heritage, and to tell good quality stories that aren't just soppy little run-over-the-mill pieces.
Yep. I agree. So Pete, how can they find The Extrovert?
The Extrovert, our film.
I'm sorry, not The Extrovert. How can they find The Unfollowed? That's what we're talking about this episode.
Okay, well I'll show you both since you talked about them. But The Unfollowed, just go onto Amazon, search The Unfollowed by Peter Pinedo, and you'll find it. It's super easy, $12.95 for a physical edition. You can also get it on Kindle. The books will be linked, so you just search Peter Pinedo, The Unfollowed on Amazon. You'll find it. And
High quality paper, folks.
yeah, we killed the tree for this, so please buy it. You know, but I think you'll enjoy it, and if you do, leave a review on Amazon. I'd appreciate that. And since we mentioned The Extrovert,
TheExtrovertMovie.com.
yeah, you can find it there.
Yes.
And
Sorry, folks. I was plugging my movie, but I meant to plug Peter's novel. In any case, Peter, send us out.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see y'all next week. We are the Pinedo Brothers.
I'm
See you
JP. And that's Peter.
around. I'm Peter.
We'll see you guys next time.